going to go ahead and request add her. And if you have any questions, we can get to them at the end. There's a little question button at the bottom with a little question mark, so feel free to put any questions in there, and hopefully we'll have time at the end to get to them. And here's Jessica.
Hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
I'm well, thanks. Is the sound all right here? I can hear you fine.
Yeah, if you can hear me, I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm going to put my phone down and hit that. Doesn't change anything. All right, well, Jessica, I think I just wanted to start off with, if any viewers out there are new to your practice, aren't familiar with you, I'd love to be able to, for you to just kind of give a brief kind of pitch of what your practice is.
Sure. Well, a lot of artists work with materials to specifically say something. They choose the material that then they'll like sculpt into something that will be their expression. But I basically think of myself as an artist that my expression is a relationship with the materials that I use. So an example of that might be that I take man-made materials like books or pencils or PVC pipes, and I try and sort of work with those materials and figure out what I can do with them to manipulate them themselves, to sort of think about their material qualities, and then different processes to change, manipulate those materials, and through that I like come to a new place, a new understanding of the material. Adrian, you adjusted your phone right there. Now I'm getting strange feedback on the sound.
Is that better now?
That's better. Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I had some examples actually that I thought would be good to look at together, so people can kind of get some context. So let me see if I can.
Great.
Find
Yeah.
these
While you pull that up,
images.
we'll talk a little bit more.
Yeah. So here's the first one. It's kind of cropped here.
Perfect.
Unfortunately.
That's a perfect example. So one of the things that I do is I sort of take the man-made and I turn it into something that reminds us of nature or makes us think about it differently. So what you're looking at here, this piece, is made out of books. But what I've done with the books is I've put them through several different processes in order to create this piece. What you're looking at is something that's hung on a wall. There you go. You got a good view of it there, with a bunch of pins. So it's little pieces of books. I call them book shards, and they're pinned to the wall individually, directly onto the wall. In this piece, in this image here, you can actually see some text on that one of those pieces, the piece that's closest to us. I think it's Henry V. So what you're actually looking at here are pieces of books that, what I've done with the book is I've immersed it in hot wax until the wax completely penetrates the pages and soaks into the pages. Then when the wax cools, the book becomes hard like a block of wood, basically. And I take that block and I carve it with a wood carving chisel, sort of scooping out pieces of the book. And then those are the pieces, those scooped out pieces are the pieces that I put the pins through and then pin to the wall. So when you look at when you look up close, it almost looks like you're seeing wood grain or some, like maybe are these pieces of wood that are pinned to the wall, or are they pieces of some sort of like natural material? Some people see feathers, some people see shells, that kind of thing. And then it invites you to come and look closer because you're still not entirely sure what you're looking at. And then I try and leave little bits of text on there as a clue. Yeah. But it's very far divorced from the book itself. So it's kind of like a new form of book collection. And they're like little specimens that we're looking at.
The title of my image got kind of cropped off, but you know, this series Bibliophilum, I think how it speaks to your interest in kind of science and this kind of like made up classification system. Whenever you see these pieces, they do like look like natural specimen or something that you might see in a natural history museum.
Yes,
And
yeah,
so it
yeah.
really leans itself to. I remember seeing this piece when I first started with the gallery back in 2012. I saw an example. I think this was right shortly after you had began showing with the gallery, and seeing like a smaller biblio pinned in the gallery, and was just so taken back with like it's one of those pieces that you see from afar and you are like, that's really intriguing, and it pulls you in, and you still can't decipher right away what it is, and it takes you quite a while, and some people don't even figure it out. You kind of have
Yeah,
have
it's very
to.
hard to figure out sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, thank you for saying that. That's exactly what I'm aiming for in actually a lot of my work and a lot of the work that we'll be seeing today. I'm sort of really interested in nature and natural forms, but not in a sort of one-to-one formation. I'm not trying to carve a tree
Right,
or a shell or
exactly.
something. I'm trying to create something that still retains the original material that it came from, the man-made material oftentimes, but then transforms it into shapes and forms and patterns that feel somehow both familiar because they have a natural quality to them, but are also not exactly, they're not a mimicry. It's not a mimicry at all of nature.
Right.
It's more like a
It,
celebration of the many different forms that you will see in nature.
and so another example, which I think is like a classic Jessica Drenk, which people may have seen before, these are her implement pieces. Let me find the picture that I have here.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a sculpture that you're, well sought after. This is your implements series, and these are made out of pencils and glue.
Yes,
So
yeah,
can you
exactly.
share
Yeah.
about this piece?
Sure. Well, I think later I can take you up to my other studio and show you
Great.
a piece in progress. But what you're looking at here, it's good to look at these first because these are finished. And it's just thousands of pencils that I've glued together. There's a sort of, I guess I think of it as an inside and an outside to the piece because there's this, it's like a shell that you're looking into, although they can be kind of large sculptures, pedestal pieces. And then after I've glued all the pencils together, I sand and erode the exterior, what I think of as the exterior of the piece, so that you see the bits of graphite and the wood that make up the pencil itself. So it's kind of in some ways, it's like a little mind trick because you look at something and what seems like the outside, you're actually looking inside the pencil because you're looking at a cross section of what's inside the pencil. Then when you look on what seems like the interior of the sculpture, you're seeing the exterior of a pencil, of thousands of pencils, basically.
Right.
Yeah. So, and it has again, the sort of natural thing comes in, the hexagonal nature of the pencils kind of makes you think of honeycomb, which is something you find in nature, and the exterior though is so different. It's very unexpected.
Yeah, it almost turns into this kind of like driftwood or calcified wood. It's
Yeah.
really intriguing to see. Oh, and there's also I remember like in certain angles, like if the light hits the graphite inside just right, it has this
Yes.
like, it almost like turns into a geode. It's like
Yeah, it
it
shines. The graphite like
reflects.
shines. Yeah, a bunch of little
Right.
circles shine back at you. Yeah. It's very cool. I have to say,
Um,
the first time that I sanded, I thought it'd be interesting to make a piece that could like draw on itself by sanding it. But
mhm.
then the sanding of the piece, the first time I did that, I was like, that is such a cool texture. I've got to do that again. And
Yeah.
so that kind of developed into this series.
Yeah, so these pieces it's been a while since we've had them. Every time we get a piece in, it's kind of like right out the door again. We've had some of these implement pieces in some of your past shows, and they're always kind of a favorite from collectors. I think it just really, people really respond to that kind of nostalgic color of the number 2 pencil, and
that color
it's
is
just,
killer. Yeah.
I think it's something that just really stays with people, and I'm
Yeah.
excited to look at one in progress up in your kind of clean studio. Right now, Jessica's coming to us from her garage studio where she does
Yeah,
all
I'll
of the
turn it
kind of dirty
around
work.
and you can take a look at what I'm looking at here. Let's see. Anyway, this is my
Yeah, so
garage studio. It's messy, even though I cleaned it. I've got just tons of stuff piled up. It is very well organized right now for me. And then you get your like the dirty stuff over here.
well, while we're down there, why don't we talk about the 2 pieces that you have on Culture
Great.
Place?
That sounds great.
Beginning,
I'm
which
gonna actually
unfortunately,
turn this over to my assistant Alicia, who's basically gonna film me so that I can sort
okay,
of point at things and show you. Does that work?
yeah, I can
Okay,
still hear you.
great.
Great. So the first piece, which it's kind of cropped a bit here, but the first piece we have is a piece called Triple Wave, and it's made out of PVC pipes,
Yeah.
and it is another material that you really transform. It's really crazy how you just take this really mundane material and transform it into something that's really refined and sophisticated. When people see these in the gallery, they often think that it's 3D printed or it's some kind of ivory, or
Yes.
but they're
Yeah.
always really surprised to
Yeah.
hear that it's PVC. So can you share with us more about this series?
I would love to. Yes, I got it all out for you. Yeah, like you said, it's PVC pipe, but when you look at it, like here, oops, you can see that it does have a sense of elegance to it, and it has sort of a serenity to it. But if I like show you the back sides of they've got the printing on them, just like PVC pipes,
Right.
because they are
I love seeing
pipes.
I love seeing the backs of them when we have them, here. You just have all of the barcodes, and it really reveals what the actual material is.
Yeah, it's kind of funny from the back. But that sort of refinery and elegance basically comes through the processing of the material that I've come up with over time. I've been working with this material for quite some time and just sort of developed my own language with it. What I end up doing with each of the pipes is I cut them on my trusty bandsaw, which is my favorite thing in the world. It's called a band. If you don't know, it's called a bandsaw because there's a blade right here that runs around. It runs in a band, and so it always is cutting. The teeth are always cutting down, and so you can cut, because it's a very thin blade. You can cut things that aren't exactly perfectly straight, or you can cut sort of different materials because the blade isn't spinning round, it's just going straight down. So I've used that to cut these pipes. So what I'll do, and this is a perfectly already cut pipe, and I don't want to turn the saw on to demonstrate because it's very loud, but I basically take it and I run it down the saw like this, and so I can cut and scoop out each of these pieces. People are always like, what tool do you use to cut the curves? And it's really just this basic bandsaw. But then the next
So
part
I'm sure it doesn't look like that once you run it through the first time.
No, it does not. It looks really messy because the teeth, the kerf of the bandsaw, marks up the plastic. It's got burrs and sort of all sorts of nasty marks on it. So then I go through the process of sanding them several different times with a couple of different tools. I use a benchtop belt sander. And then the last process, I use a little Dremel tool to get burrs out of all the corners. And then the last part of the process is a particularly tedious bit of hand sanding and polishing the pieces.
Right.
So it's sort of like a continual refinement. And then, but then it's worth it because when I get to this stage where I'm arranging, I've cut pieces of wood with a little bit of a curve to them. So they've got this sort of sine wave curve going on them. And then if I lay the PVC pipes on those, it makes this beautiful undulating piece. So basically, I think of it as the frame, but it's not actually going around the piece. It's the basis, the backbone of the piece, and then I glue the PVC pipe to that frame, and it causes this beautiful wave. So I'm sort of starting to lay out my pipes here, trying to figure out like where some of them have some different qualities to them, such as in some places I'll cut away more of the pipe, in some places I'll leave more of the pipe. And so then you get like, there's little pockets, so there's little different details to deal with. And then I arrange them such that that kind of turns into, I wouldn't call it a pattern, but I would say it's kind of a lightly chaotic,
Right.
it's almost like ripples on a larger wave. And so they're all kind of these little things floating around, and then the larger structure is this overarching wave shape.
Right. So the piece that we have is called Triple Wave. So it's a larger scale. I think it's like 72 inches wide, so about 6 feet wide. And it has that undulating wave pattern that Jessica was just demonstrating. And it really, the way that it catches light and shadow is really, really beautiful. And that finish, all of that sanding, it's really remarkable how just smooth it appears. It's just like the last thing you ever would imagine it would be is PVC pipes.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite things, if I hang a piece like this up in my house, I love that it's different in the morning than it is in the evening, because when the light in the house changes, the light hitting the piece changes, and it brings out a different character to the piece.
Mm-hmm.
I just love that. So then the environment becomes sort of a part of the piece itself.
Okay, so moving on to the other piece that we have listed on Culture Place by you is actually it's in our current group show at the gallery. It is a new material for you, which is really exciting. So to give people some context, the last show that we had with you was in 2017. And so it's been almost 3 years now since you last showed with us. And you've had a lot of time to develop new works, take a step back from materials that you had been really comfortable with, and kind of get your hands dirty with some new things. And this piece here, Aggregate, is an example of such. And this is made out of junk mail and cardboard. So this one, Aggregate 1, is up now on Culture Place and also viewable here in Dallas at the gallery in our group exhibition.
Yep.
So can you tell us about developing this new material and what that was like?
Yeah, absolutely. Usually I just sort of, when I'm looking for something new to do, or if I'll often have an idea, like I could do this with that material, I could do that with that material. And if it sticks in my head long enough, I will eventually try it. And so the first thing that I tried with this was just, I cut some pieces of catalogs and magazines and things that I was just like the junk mail that I was going to recycle anyway. I cut them up and started just gluing them together into layers. And that was kind of interesting, but it got messy. The edges, I couldn't line it up perfectly so you could see the edges. So I took a belt sander and I ground away and sanded away at the surface of that. And you can see that in Aggregate 1, the piece that you're showing, because it's got almost a ripple to it, almost like it's been eroded, and that's what I've carved into the piece itself. And that was really exciting. I loved how that looked. It's the perfect example of sometimes I just have to try things in my studio, and some of them turn out being complete duds. They don't do anything. And this one really struck me. It was so surprising that the colors were so beautiful, and it's so immediately it made me think of rocks and stones. Layered rocks and stones, and that got me really excited because I was making it out of something so opposite from like
Right.
rock. Paper and rock are not the same, and so that kind of got me going. And then I've been, since that piece, I worked on that piece, and then I've been just developing that series more and more. So these are some of, I wanted to show you a few more of the pieces that are in that same exact vein, but
Yeah.
the places I'm going with that.
So the piece that we have on Culture Place and available, it's about 33 inches wide. So it's a relatively smaller scale piece. It's not large. So from here, we're going to start looking at a preview of what Jessica has been developing for her show that's going to open here at Gallery Urbane at the either early September or late August. We're still finalizing, when's the safest time for Jessica to drive all of the work here. But I think it makes sense for us to continue with how you've continued developing Aggregate, because the one on Culture Place was the first piece that you did, and since then that same material and series has developed a lot. So I'd love for you to share what else you've been up to with that material.
Thank you. Yes. Well, like I said, the first one I did, Aggregate 1, because it ended up looking so much like stone and rock to me, it really got me thinking about rock and what rock is, and also thinking about landscape and stripes in rocks, and how rocks are deposited, or usually some of them are deposited over time and built up and built up and built up in layers. And I liked that idea because there's layers of the junk mail. And so I started developing these pieces, which, like for instance, the piece on the wall, I had the idea that this could be as if it was a cross section of a mountain, looking through the mountain at different bands of colored rock, different kinds of colored rock. And I've been playing with the forms and the shapes that I can get with the junk mail itself. And I've been adding to it. So something like this piece here is raw, it's raw paper, but the piece next to it, so you can see there's holes and crevices in this. And then the piece next to it had filled in all the holes and crevices with some plaster, because I thought that would be sort of add the idea of, there's rocks, and then there's a little inclusion of something else that got maybe poured into there or extruded or got pressurized into the rock. So there's often like different kinds of rock found together, and I thought that contrast worked kind of nicely. And also, it's just sort of surprising to me that the colors of the very face of all this white paper, junk mail, cardboard, those colors come out so blue and purple in some places, and I think the white really brings that out a little bit.
Right. And what about the large piece that's on the table there? Yeah.
So this is what I've done just this week. I finally sanded the face of this piece. This is long. It's 11 feet long. And this one, I was sort of like developing the process just a little bit more. With these pieces, I am choosing where each little, I guess I'd say, air pocket or hole goes, and sort of designing them as I glue the paper together. But for this piece, I did something a little bit different, because I was thinking about layers of rock and how they might fold up together on themselves with pressure, it's like pressure or rising and folding and things like that.
Right.
But maybe
Can we see a detail of that piece?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe I would just think about that folding process and use that as a part of my process. So
I love all of the colors that start to pop in there.
Yeah, you can see there's things like manila envelope, there's white paper, there's some like blue colored flyers, or there's some yellow phone book, there's brown cardboard.
I'm going to start saving all of my junk mail and sending it to you.
Yes, totally. Even if you look at the side, like the very edge of all of these
Right.
these layers.
I think this is just such an
cataloged
exciting addition to everything you've done so far, just because it, like you said, you don't really seek to like completely transform a material or like to make it, you know, there's still some integrity of the material left that people can catch on to, and it still may be difficult to kind of search and make sense of it, but eventually it's there and you can see it once, you know, when all is said and done.
Yes, yeah, thank you, yeah. Yeah, here you can almost read a few little bits if you look into the cracks of the piece, so, which is really fun. Yeah. And I love, I mean, for me, it's like I know that I'm onto something when the process that I'm doing is producing something that is visually appealing to me, but also the concept is also working for the piece as well. And for these, I think that the concept of the material of junk mail, which just arrives in my mailbox and is something I was just gonna touch once, maybe look through a catalog, recycle it. So that's a very transitory material in my mind. That's like nothing. And then I'm trying to turn it into something that is just in our heads. It's conceptually in terms of like what it is, so opposite of that in terms of, we're talking about millions of years of rock layering up, and I'm thinking about that imagery and the contrast of that imagery with the transitory nature of our interaction with junk mail. I just think that those two things, like, they clash in your brain a little bit and kind of like give you a little jolt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's the part that kind of stays with you even after you've seen it in person. So moving on to more previews of new work that you have been developing for the show, which has been really funny because, you know, this show was originally planned for this past April around the kind of the art fair time. And it was going to be in our front two spaces, and we were really looking forward to it. And obviously, we've had to adjust since then, but it's also giving you more time in the studio to develop new works. And, you know, having been corresponding with you about the show for the past few months and before, it's funny to see how much things have changed since then, and you keep developing things. And the show that was in April would have been completely different than the show that is gonna open this fall. And so another new piece, another new body of work that you've been developing is a body of work called the Contour series, which I would love to take a look at. I'm going to put this photo up, but I'm now realizing that my image examples are not cropped correctly or not formatted correctly for Instagram Live, which is a big upset. But but yeah, Jessica will show us the real thing. So these are a body of works that are developed with plywood.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll just sort of, since your image isn't working, I'll just sort of talk you through it. Well, one of the things that happens in my studio sometimes is a sort of happenstance. And one happenstance was a lack of materials during the coronavirus led me to look around my own studio for other materials, other possibilities. I mean, it's right in my wheelhouse. So I started looking at things like all the scraps of plywood. This is just like a small stack of extra plywood scraps that I end up having. And I thought, there's got to be something that I could do with that. I hate to throw them away. And it's wood, it's malleable, it's carvable in some way. So I started gluing all those layers of plywood together. So here's just an example of sort of a slab. This is many different layers of plywood glued together. Here on the top, you can even see where the glue was leaking out as I clamped it down. So I basically make a wood block out of layers of manufactured wood. And then I found this carving tool that I can add to my angle grinder that will specifically carve wood. So I've got this wheel.
I'm just like imagining you in like a hardware store, like finding different tools to get excited about.
Yes, I am bizarre at a hardware store because I will make strange requests like, what could you cut this with? Or, what would hold
Right.
together? Or, you have 200 PVC pipes. I see only 10 on the back. Yeah. What's that for?
Right.
Well, anyway, I found this tool and it goes on the angle grinder and it has a sort of a convex surface. And so I can grind curves and carve little, like basically concave pieces into the
Right.
plywood itself. And basically I take those two elements and then I go with it and I just see what I can do. So
Yeah.
here's actually one piece that is finished. It's not hung on the wall properly, but you can see that I started grinding and grinding and grinding until
Right.
I carved through and I started carving through the holes. And then that became really intriguing. And it also just became so beautiful. I got completely entranced by the what looks like wood grain, but is actually
Right.
different colors of plywood. So I use different kinds of plywood so the,
Okay.
the colors of the layers contrast.
Right.
And there's also, here, maybe we can see it better here. There's like a light colored plywood that I used, contrasted with
Wow.
fine plywood. And this dark line here that you see throughout the piece, it looks like
Right.
wood grain, but it's actually the glue layer. There's a dark brown glue in
Oh, I
between
see.
that they glue the plies of the plywood together, the different layers together. So then when I
Right.
cut down into it, it has this sort of, again, you have all these lines to play with, all this linear quality, in addition to the sculptural quality, the like three-dimensional quality of the surface being carved. There's also this, it's like a drawing on the piece as well, or playing with both color and line and shape and form. So
Right.
I got really into this. And this is my, this will definitely be going into the show. I'm so excited.
I can't wait to see it in person.
It's 6 feet by 6 feet. It's in 3 panels. It'll hang like this. And
Wow.
it's big. It's kind of heavy because it's wood. So I have to, in order to see what I'm working on and to see if it looks good, I basically have to like come up on my table and take a look at it and decide, need some more holes in here. This looks good. I'm going to work this area a little bit more. And then sometimes I just come up here and look at it. So
Right.
this has been my
Wow.
recently.
Yeah, I love how this one just appears like this. It looks like this natural surface that has been kind of worn away by erosion, like over years and years and years.
Absolutely. Like some of it, reminds me of landscape. It looks like you're looking down on a landscape. But
Totally.
it also, to me, it looks like places where you'll see rocks eroded in sort of like little pits. There'll be a bunch
Right.
of in a rock, and like what eroded this? Was it water? Was it wind? What's the scale? Is it supposed to depict a large landscape, or is it supposed to depict something very, very tiny, like a microscopic bit of nature, or a little bit of tree bark? It also kind of reminds me of tree bark in some ways. So
Right.
I like that it's kind of in between, and that's really got me fascinated, and that's why I've been just having so much fun with developing this series. So I'm really excited to bring it to you and put it on the wall,
Yeah.
Alice, and so we can all see it.
Yeah. And I'm sure that days when you're working on this series, it's a pretty messy day in the studio.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's like full. This is a small respirator, but this is a full respirator. It's just I've actually been carving outside because on a day when I'm really grinding on this, I will haul like 2 to 3 trash cans of sawdust out to the back
Oh
of
my
the property
gosh.
and dump it out in the woods because it's creating so much dust. It's nuts. It's a good thing I live in the country, frankly.
Yeah. So I think this would be a good time to transition up into the clean studio which you have upstairs. So Jessica's been coming to us from her garage studio where she'll do all of the kind of dirty work, all of the sanding and grinding. But she is fortunate to have another space upstairs where we'll look at some more pieces that have been developing for the new show. And I think it will be good to revisit a material that you've been using for many, many years, and one that people know you really well for, which would be your use of books. This is a piece here called Cerebral Mapping that is also up in our group show at the moment. And this was a series that you developed after Bibliophilum, I believe. This was another way of using books and wax and transforming it into these kind of sprawling wall installations that I will pull up another detail
I've
of.
made it up to the studio.
Yay! Awesome.
Yeah, so I figured we needed a demonstration.
Yeah. Let's. So I have a picture up right now that's a detail of Biblio. So you'll see that these books are cut in strips, and they are arranged in these kind of swirling patterns with the spine keeping them intact, and they kind of sprawl on the wall in different sections. So they're installed in kind of sections of 9 or 8, depending on how big the piece is. So yeah, I'd love for you to show us kind of the early stages of working with that material.
The first breakdown. First, I take my books down to my favorite bandsaw, and I cut them up. And so that are maybe of different depths, just little pieces that some of them are like have the binding and no words on them. They're just a sort of neutral color. But on the other side, if it got through cutting to the words, it's like a gray color. And I take them and I basically just soak them in water. So I've been soaking these so we could take a look at them. And that just makes them really pliable, the water does. I also soak them in a glue water as well so that when I form them, they will stay and retain their shape. But basically, I soak my books, I take them out, and I just start to sort of pull the pieces apart. I take chunks and clumps and interlace them. So if you kind of think of like shuffling a deck, but with a little more artistry to it. And just sort of, this is just something that I developed over several years, really, just the sort of how of making these pieces nicely interweave.
Wow.
So that they sort of start, you can see they start to form like these sort of really beautiful squiggles, and the colors, you can see the contrast in the colors. And basically, if I play that out for a while, it starts to become a really beautiful pattern. The piece that you have there in the gallery, the Cerebral Mapping piece, those I tried to make them, they look a lot like this, I'd say, where they're kind of far apart. And there's a lot of space. So in the gallery, when you come and look at this piece, you see the books, but then you see the wall through all the holes. So it has sort of a lacy nature to it. And so I've been doing that for several years, and got it as big as that piece you have in the gallery.
Yeah, which is 11 feet tall, by the way. Yeah, it's 11 feet tall by like 80 inches wide.
Yes, yeah. So I got them sort of that big, and then recently have been working on playing with this basic idea, like exactly as I'm doing here, but thinking, well, what if it, instead of being sort of lacy and with holes, what if instead I started like really scrunching them together, and you get different shapes that way. And I got really interested in that, and that has has a different quality to it. So that's one of the things.
So that leads us to compression, which is what you started developing with this kind of more tight knit
Yeah, that compressed
use of
quality. Yeah.
those. And by the way, Jessica, I just want to give you a heads up. I'm not sure what the time limit on these lives are. So if I get kicked off, I'll just start another one, and
Okay,
Joe
yeah,
and we'll continue. So, um,
okay, great. Yeah, so I mean, before anything else, I just wanted to point out, so these behind me are panels I've done of this exact technique, the Scrunch Together books. And so this is going to be 3 different panels that I'm going to bring to you to hang in the gallery. And the sort of one of the amazing things about it to me is the color and the contrast of colors, the shapes, and also I've used book pieces of differing heights. So there'll be a short one and a tall one. And then when I interlace them together, there's a lot of like push and pull to it. So there's places where you look in and places where you look out. So there's some
right.
depth to it as well that you can't see right now.
And are these also encased in wax too, or do you leave them uncovered?
Right. Yes, I also put these in wax. So here's an example. These have the 3 pieces here have not been waxed yet, but this is a finished piece. And the wax, the reason I use the wax is, first of all, it kind of hardens and also preserves the pages from exposure
right.
to air. But it also brings out the color of the books. It is astounding. Like, check out this piece right here. It's pink.
Right. I love how colorful
add
these.
To it. It just the paper, there was some dye in it or something, and it came out pink. And then there's really dark books, older books will come out much darker. And what the wax does is it really pulls that out. It's similar to if you go to a riverbed and you pull a wet stone out and it looks so colorful, and you take it home and then it's dry and it looks really blah.
Right.
The wax brings the color out and keeps the color, like makes the color stay, which I just love. And now I'm just using that as a compositional element as I build these pieces here. So we've got like dark, lights, pinks, grays. I mean, you see it in the piece in the gallery. There's kind of a variety of color.
Right. Yeah. I can't wait to see these in person. How large are those panels?
These are, I think if I'm remembering right, they're about 84 inches by 36 inches, something like that. So you can get the scale.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Great. So another piece I want to talk about, another series that also utilizes books, and a piece that people have seen before. We had, I think, like 1 example in your last show with us. So it's still something that people haven't seen a ton of here in Dallas, but it is a series that you've continued to develop over the past few years, and we will have some new pieces in the upcoming show, which is Circulation, which I'm excited to look at. So I have an image up now, but this is also books and wax. Yet again, another technique that uses the same materials but comes up with something completely different. So I'd love for you to share more about that series.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is just, it's somewhat similar in that it's books and that I'm working with color and line. But here I've cut the books into just basically strips. So they're free form, just strips. Kind of like the strips of junk mail, actually. But they have different. I see that right away. Palette, the piece, and then rolling. I just basically like take this and I roll it up into a tiny little cylinder, and then I add more and I add more and I add more, and I just build it bit by bit. So I start with the center of something like this. I start in the center, and then I just slowly build out each layer. And each layer I try and pay attention to what color I'm adding to the layer. I try and pay attention to the overall shape that the piece is taking on. And I try and sort of emphasize those bumps and in-out quality that gives it more of the sense of sort of being like rings of a tree or something like that. I kind of play with that. And so I basically, the process is really simple. It's I take some books and I add my book layers to the next layer, and I take my brad nailer and I just like staple nail a few nails into here. I'm not doing it because it's loud again, but I just do that. So I do that, and I go all the way around the whole piece with that, and then I start the next layer. So it's really just built from the inside out. And
I love your lazy Susan.
So tedious. I basically like innovate. I'm like, okay, I've got to find a quick way to nail these together. Nail the brad nailer. I need to be able to spin this thing. So I like got a lazy Susan and I add pieces of stuff to it. So I can just like sit here, like spin it, I work, I listen to my podcast, and then when it's grown large enough here, I'll bring out the next largest piece of wood.
Right. And I'm sure like so much of your practice is like, because all of your work is so labor intensive, like there's got to be a point where you're like also trying to figure out how to make these like be more efficient in the studio. And
Absolutely.
so I love the lazy Susan allows you to do that.
Yeah, this is a favorite little thing. Yeah, basically it's like half creativity and half sort of engineering or process, like a manufacturing line, or like ways to make something that is time intensive as least time intensive on myself as possible, while still being able to like manipulate it. Yeah, so these I've been working on for a couple of months. I don't do it all the time because it would just get mind numbing. Here's one that's in development. And it's kind of like a floppy disk at this point because it's just nailed together and the nails don't go through. And here's a sample of the back. You can see it's I don't know. It's just you can see it's paper the whole way through.
Yeah.
And then I end up because this is so flexible, I end up gluing it to a plywood backing. And then I pour hot wax over it and carve the surface flat, basically, and then I polish it. And then again, you see here what the wax does for the book pages, because these are the same. I'm using the same kinds of books between these two, but the wax just really brings the color out. And
it really enhances that contrast between the different colors that you're using.
Yeah.
And I do love just how smooth these surfaces turn into. They just turn almost into these like really beautiful, almost segments of a tree trunk in a way.
Yeah, I kind of think
the surface are really alluring.
Like a petrified wood, when you see that it's polished and it's very colorful, and but it has that stone feeling. So again, it doesn't quite feel like paper in the finished form. But if you look at the side of it, you see just the very edge of the paper, and you can see a little bit of sort of text. Or here I'm looking at page 182. So,
I love it.
Yeah, it's like a petrification in itself.
So before I think we've got a few minutes left. I think there's an hour time mark. Before we run out of time, I'd love for you to go back to the implements piece, the kind of classic Jessica Drenk, which was the pencil sculptures that we were looking at earlier. So I know you've set up kind of a piece that's in progress. So it's not very often that people get to see it in this state. So this is one of the first times I've seen it in this state, actually. So
yeah, I think that's probably true. So this is exactly what I was talking about, where I glue all the pencils together. Here you see it inside and outside. You see the pencils. This is the surface that I will eventually, once I've built up the piece enough, I'll eventually be sanding this surface, so you see that interior, you get that interior look at the pencil, the cross section of all the pencils. And I just thought, since we're here, I'll
Yeah.
show you how I make it.
Yeah.
Because it is, again, this is another sort of, how do you do that? Well, I could glue one pencil to one pencil and then another pencil to that, and I could slowly build that up. But the way that I found to sort of accelerate this process of gluing them together is to make little plaster molds of what will be the interior here.
Right.
And so I make a mold. I mean, this is just extremely rudimentary. So it's just got to be a shape. It doesn't really matter. So I make a shape. I'm like, okay, that'll be an interior surface. I cut the shape into 2 halves. And then I place one down on the table. So now I'm dealing with a flat surface. And then I can stack up a bunch of pencils around this. I can put down a layer of glue on top of these. And then I can put down another row of pencils and just push them all up against the plaster mold. And then if I just do that repeatedly, layer after layer, it grows into half of this shape. If I do that with the other half, I can put the 2 halves together, build the whole thing until that's just sort of like the very basic beginning of it. Then I've got something that, like right now, I'm probably 3/4 of the way through building this one out. You can see there's still flat surfaces. So then now I'll go and I'll glue by hand. Undulations, some inside and out pieces. I'll decide maybe which way I want this to sit. When it's finished, you know, I can kind of start turning it around and thinking like, how's this gonna work? Oh, I like that. It sits like that. And then I can sort of build out more parts of this until it feels like it's ready to be sanded.
Right. Man, all of these pieces, you just all of these pieces, like, I don't know how your patience is through the roof to be able to like.
Well, you notice that I do many different things, and I do them all at the same time, because if I had to do like 2 years of this, I probably would go insane. So it's like I kind of designed a couple different things. It's like trying to diversify my activities a little bit. You know?
It seems like people watching are really interested in how much glue you use. They're saying that you're keeping Elmer's in business.
Yeah, well, and this isn't even for this. This is like, I use wood glue for these. The Elmer's is for the junk mail pieces and for the pieces. And yeah, I basically just go in every time I go into Lowe's or Home Depot. I like get them, you know.
That's funny.
And the other day, my husband says, "You probably used more gallons of glue this summer than you've used gasoline, because I haven't been going anywhere, and I've been running, like blowing through these." So,
that is so funny. Well, I think that's everything we wanted to cover today. Thank you so much for giving us this kind of behind the scenes look at, and I've worked with you for many years, and I haven't really even seen as much detail in your studio as this. So it's been really nice.
Cool.
And we're really looking forward to your show that opens soon. to be announced, right? But I don't think I see any questions. If anyone has anyone, you're welcome to share. But in the meantime, again, you can visit Culture Place to see the 2 works that we have available on there, or you can also contact us for some pieces we have in our inventory, which we will soon be have a lot more, obviously.
Jessica will be.
So I think that's it. Anything else from you, Jessica?
No, just I'm also really looking forward to the show. I don't know if I've ever looked forward to a show more. It's anticipated. I'm going to keep anticipating it, but as it's been delayed and delayed, it's been a form of a gift because I've had that much more time to really delve into the ideas, and it's just, I think it's going to be really strong, and I can't wait to do it. Thanks so much for inviting me to show you the studio, and
Yeah.
hopefully see you, if not in person, but virtually
Yeah.
sometime in the future.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we will see more with Jessica soon. All right,
Yeah.
talk to you
All right.
soon, Jessica.
Bye.
Thank you.